What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Hope y'all are having a good day. Welcome. We got the waiting room packed. People are funneling in. Super excited to have all of you guys here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Artists of Data Science Happy Hours. It is Friday, March 12th, 2021. Super excited to have all of you guys here. Hopefully, you got a chance to check out the interview that was released earlier today, which was with Dave Kelly of Analytics IQ. Had a great time speaking to Dave, learning about his company. He's given all of us a free data set to work with that's got 500 rows, 50 columns, which should be really fun to start doing some stuff with. So go ahead and check that out. It is right there in the show notes of the show. It's been a crazy week for me. I was on the Super Data Science podcast with John Crone over the weekend. On Monday, I was live from the Data Den with Susan Walsh. I've also did an interview with AI Journal. I also got a chance to interview Tiffany Schlein. She's the author of 24/6, and she's also the woman who founded the Webby Awards, Emmy award-winning director as well. So that was a lot of fun. Earlier today, I got an opportunity to interview Jonathan Tesser, somebody that we all know quite well. So that was a lot of fun. But super excited to have all you guys here, man. Welcome everybody. We got Tom, Tor, Kristen, we got Wiko, Russell, awesome. We got Vikram, Naresh in the house, dude. So happy to see everybody here. How's everybody doing? Right on. Tom, how's your week been?
I've transitioned back to heavy duty coding, and it feels like, oh, I'm a little out of shape. I'm going to have to take this slow here for a while.
Yeah, like
Anyway.
heavy duty coding in what sense?
Oh, I'd been doing a lot of study to figure out how to get around some of the corners that I'd coded myself into. And then all of a sudden I'd done some diagramming of the architecture I wanted to do for my big tool. And then one morning I woke up and said, dang, I want to code. And I was coding fine. It's just that I realized, oh, shoot, this is a big mountain to climb still, even though I'm ready to climb it again. It just, there's so many things to think through. I really should have a team helping me, but they're okay waiting on me a little bit right now too.
So
that's why I wrote my grit article yesterday.
That book is Angela Duckworth's work is amazing. That book Grit definitely had a huge effect on me. I read it just only a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018 when I first read it, and yeah, it was just one of those books that definitely shook my belief system and changed the way I look at the world. So I highly recommend that one. So when you're coding yourself into a corner, talk to us about what does that mean and how can we avoid doing that to ourselves?
So I can be a little too hard on myself. It's not as bad as I'm making it sound, but it's a very challenging problem. It's associated with what you might call language processing, not natural language processing, but technical language processing. And when I took it on, I knew it'd be a challenge, but I wasn't quite sure how big of a challenge. And that was one of the reasons I picked up Pragmatic Programmer. I thought, I need to see what I can do to get around it's like the Dave and Andy say, your lizard brain. My lizard brain was, yes, thank you, was screaming at me. And so I realized I could improve the way I was structuring my data as it worked. And I used a lot of concepts from their book. I remember feeling like, oh, I'm not following dry well enough. And then, but I'll get back to that. And I created a lot of great tools that helped me get around proof of concept. But then the way I was putting the GUI around it and the way I was interacting with SQL through Python was pretty cool. And I created some really fun tools, like a tool that could say you've got 63,000 technical documents and you've got a new one coming in, I could load this giant corpus matrix, a sparse matrix, and find the closest matching document in under a half a second. That was a huge breakthrough for me, but I wasn't even doing word embeddings to get there. I was just using frequency count matrix. And then I trained my own glove model, global vectors. It's like word to vec, but a little different. And did some cool lookup engines with synonyms and dictionary things to deal with aligning words that were close to the same meaning. And, but it was at that point where that was a big hurdle. And I realized I need to check out transformers just in case. And because what it's like, Harpreet, most of the time I'm saying, okay, can I find a test standard? Ah, great. If I can find a test standard, now I find a unit, now I find a value. But then when you get into the property names, I have the honor of working with UL Prospector, best plastics database in the world by far, decades old now, grown into a great SaaS. But we have very unified terminology and presentations. The rest of the world does not. So it's a way of automating the updates and the new additions of plastics and other things like that. And I hope I'm not losing anyone here. But like making a clustering tool that deals with finding those complete properties, but the big last hurdle was aligning the property names. And that's where I'm going to try to employ the transformers. But even just while taking the time out to study how I could tackle this big problem better, the whole tool set, it was great to take that refresher time because it wasn't just transformers. It's seeing all the clever new ways people were tokenizing things and pre-processing things. And it just germinated some new ideas to where one day I went, oh, I'm ready to go at it again. So, but I think what was the biggest single help was something Dave and Andy said in their book. And, you know, this was a real encouragement for us as data evangelists in general. It's that we're all processing data. And that book's not a data science book, The Pragmatic Programmer, but they made a big deal about it's all about processing data. And I started seeing the way I was managing my data quite differently. But
yeah, I like that. I'm actually going to be speaking to Andy this Wednesday. Got him coming onto the podcast. Most of my questions are going to be coming from this book, his other book, The Pragmatic Guide to Thinking and Learning. So most of my questions will be coming from there, but I'm going to bake in a few from Pragmatic Programmer. But yeah, definitely excited to speak to Andy this Wednesday. Sounds like you're doing a lot of really, really interesting stuff, Tom. That's super.
Oh, I've never had more fun in my career. I feel totally spoiled. And the nice thing is my company trusts me.
Yeah.
You can't buy that. That's nice.
We're about to show off your engineering day book. Is that what that is?
I was going to jokingly say, let me show you my copy of Pragmatic Programmer. And then, of Dennis's book.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of physical books. I can't do the like electronic books for some reason. Yeah.
The almost, wait, I'm sure you're 29, Harpreet. The almost 30-year-old tells the almost 60-year-old he'd rather have a physical book. That's hilarious.
Almost 40, but I'll take that. Thank you. Right on, guys. Hey, well, thank you guys so much for joining in, and thanks, Tom, for sharing that. That was really, really cool. Sounds like you're working on some awesome stuff. Shout out to everybody that just funneled in. We got Nicole, Janeway, Bales in the house. What's up, Nicole? Good to see you again. Jacqueline, Joe, Eric, Vivian, Angelo. Happy to see all you guys here. So there's a question in the chat from Russell. Russell, what's this general question you have? Something about something costing 69 million?
Yeah. Good evening, afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's well. So there's been a recent news article. I've pasted a URL in the chat for it, but there's been a piece of artwork sold, an NFT artwork, so that's non-fungible token artwork. And as I understand this, basically it's similar to kind of blockchain. So it allows a person to purchase ownership of a virtual piece of art, even though it stays in the public domain. They're kind of stamped as the owner. And someone has paid 69 million credits or whatever the currency was, as I think it was cryptocurrency, to own a single piece of art that seems to be 5,000 individual composited pieces of art that are high res that you can zoom in and see individually, but cannot be split and sold separately. So essentially 69 million has given this person ownership of a public piece of art. So it's a lot of money to spend just to stamp your name, have your name inscribed on a plaque, essentially, on a public piece of art. So interested to hear other people's opinions on this.
So hold up, he paid that much money and it's something that he can't even really take home and I can go look at it whenever I want, anytime I want?
Pretty much, as I understand it, yeah.
I don't understand this stuff at all. It's like a real big, like, verified Twitter check mark. It's just like a lot of money for a real expensive, like, clout badge. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. So I'm really interested to see what some of y'all that know a lot more about this stuff than I do have to say about it, because it's kind of crazy to me.
I wish Carlos was here because he's like the crypto guy.
Yeah.
He wrote a book about it. We'll be talking about that book on the podcast a little bit later. But yeah, I have no clue why anybody would do that. I would love to hear anybody's opinion. Joe?
I've been in the tech space, I guess, long enough that anything that seems this stupid probably has a possibility of turning into something awesome. Tom knows what I'm talking about, and so do other people.
It's striking. I don't even understand it yet, but I'm getting this Crypto Kitties vibe right now already. You remember that?
Yeah. I got friends that are in the crypto space and have their own coins and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's something I stay away from, but I just learned never to second guess this kind of stuff. Actually, it just has a way of taking on a life of its own. And when it seems absurdly stupid, there's actually probably some point to it that I'm not seeing. And so I just learned never to write anything off, and that's happening. If it seems absurd, it's probably going to be big. And like in a way that you don't expect, though, right? Because we're all trying to approach it from this angle, and it's going to be something on the left field. So
yeah, that's strange.
I can throw something out there. So like right now, like you said, somebody just bought Jack, Twitter guy, Jack. Somebody help me with his last name.
Jack Dorsey.
Dorsey.
Thank you. Somebody just bought Jack Dorsey's first tweet from several years ago. And same kind of thing. So they have a blockchain record that they own that tweet. And yes, Harpreet, you can go look it up and enjoy it anytime you want. I'm sure you look at it regularly like I do. And but so right now it's like just for like collectibles. But the other benefit of it that I understand is when you tokenize an asset like real estate or the Mona Lisa, or like something that is a physical good, and then you have that record saved in a blockchain in a decentralized fashion, so that if the place where your paper contract or a copy or deed of ownership burns down, because once in a while that happens, a decentralized record still exists that you own that thing, and it is yours until the blockchain says otherwise. So kind of where I see non-fungible tokens going over time is tokenization of assets, like physical, tangible assets.
I have a little, I guess, theory about that. We've seen humans create value for something tangible for years. We just could never understand that. Where you could see a piece of art cost millions of dollars, and it's based on different things, right? The provenance, the history, and the person's sentiment about that piece. We're just starting to see it transcend to the digital world now. And that tokenization that Eric is speaking to is to kind of, put a stamp on that provenance to make sure that you are the rightful owner and that history is not lost for the original piece. And, with the whole digital currency, Bitcoins and all, it's just us transferring our sentiment, our thoughts, like the way we feel about a piece. We're just transferring it to the digital world. That's all this is. That's my theory about it. So we've been doing it with the physical stuff. We're not doing it digitally.
I remember
Really
when Bitcoin became like this thing back in the day. We're talking, the blockchain enthusiasts in like the early 2010s. There was a thought back then. It reminded me a lot of like the internet. When that became kind of a thing in the 90s. But blockchain, it was this idea that if you extend it to a logical conclusion, each one of us have our own coins, right? And everyone just transacts with, Harpreet coin and so forth, right? And then this becomes like a new way of doing stuff. And I'm not gonna write anything off, right? Every time I try doing that, like I said, I end up being like, wrong for all the wrong reasons. So.
Is it wrong to think that, things that in the digital phase, like that you own, has more value when more people can see it, right? So a piece of art, you can own it to your house. Nobody can get to your house to validate the value. But I feel like digital wise, a piece like this NFT selling for 69, the reason why it's holding the value too is because a lot of people can see it too, right? Maybe is there a reason behind that? The digital world forces a lot of people. You have to have a lot of people look at it to actually jump up the value. Maybe is that what you're seeing, Joe?
I don't know. It's an interesting analysis. I've never thought of, like kind of this like CPM rate for like attention and NFTs. This is a fascinating thought exercise, and so now I'm gonna spend the whole weekend thinking about this. So
yeah,
thanks, Craig.
So for like something like Bitcoin, right? So the code behind all that it's all open source, right? So if I actually did want to fork it and create Harpreet coin or Sahota coin, like I could do that. It's just if people buy into this, right? Like if all of us artists of data science just started mining my coins, we could make our own cryptocurrencies. I don't know. I don't know if this is how it works. I need to do some more research on it, but that's
no, you're spot on. It's not actually that complicated. The code is kind of heady at a Linus Torvalds level, but once you start spreading it apart, it's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of the Ethereum network because it works on a bit of a different premise, but yeah, like you probably would prefer to go use the Litecoin code or something faster. Bitcoin's actually quite a dinosaur. You can just drive yourself batty waiting for it to go through sometimes because it's just so slow and so gargantuan. But I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on this if you're okay with it, Harpreet. I think the power,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the power of cryptocurrency is the decentralization. Now, but also it's the spirit of in Ethereum, like I'm saying, is a different animal, but the whole power of smart contracts to keep a decentralized, safe record for anything is also powerful. Say for your medical records, where only you could control them and transfer them to who you want. It's kind of like secure shell on steroids when you get down to it. But I may have said something wrong, and I'm happy for someone to correct it.
I think, Tom, blockchain is useful also not just for transactions, but for verifying the lineage of products. So say something that has got the, I can't remember the proper word, but, the denomination originator, something that's protected, like Parmigiano Reggiano and that type of stuff. To have blockchain on that so you can prove its authenticity, that's going to be a real big thing, I think, in consumer goods.
Another benefit is, Harpcoin or whatever you end up coming up with, of like Tom said, the decentralization that is nice is I once did work with a guy in Sweden and he would pay me via PayPal in dollars. So he's transferring it from krones or whatever the currency is called exactly to dollars. And I would get destroyed on the exchange rate because it was an international exchange. But when he would pay me in Bitcoin and then I would change it out to be dollars, it was exactly the same as if he had paid me in dollars. I only had to pay the 1.5% rate selling it through when I would sell it through Coinbase and turn it into dollars. So having a decentralized currency really facilitates cross-border transactions.
Yeah, it's super.
That
super
sounds great, Eric.
interesting. And
I bet
Joe's
you we should
talking
get
about
some of those in the wallet, though, hey?
Joe's talking about how on Clubhouse it's all just crypto people. Like one of my idols, Naval Ravikant, is on Clubhouse, and he does a lot of crypto talks. I need to join in on one of those and just get up to speed on this before I talk to Carlos about it for our interview. But yeah, great topic. I actually just messaged Carlos to see if he wants to come in because we're going heavy on crypto stuff. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and turn it over to some questions. First question I got on deck is from Eric. And then after that, if anybody has a question, go ahead, send me a message. I will add you to the queue. Eric, go for
Cool. Yeah, so I was curious just to know what people's first quote unquote data project was, as far back as you can remember. Cole, Joe, Greg, like what was the first project that you remember? Because now, we get on LinkedIn and we see everybody who's got their, their deep neural network or whatever that they're doing, but it's not super practical because most of us aren't doing that for our first project. So as you think back, what was the first project you really did with data and what was your role in it?
I guess my first project, like that was a data science related project, was I was using clinical data from back when I was a biostatistician. So I did this while I was a biostatistician, and the whole point of the project was for me to use blood test and lab results to predict whether or not somebody would have a serious adverse reaction to the drug that we're giving them. And I used something simple. I used random forest and logistic regression and compared the two, did a baseline I think my baseline was just to predict that everybody would get like some type of, I forgot what the baseline was, but those are the two that I used to compare after that. It was super simple, and it was enough for me to get a handle on how to use Python, how to use Jupyter notebooks, and how to build a machine learning model in scikit-learn. Let's turn this over to let's hear from Nicole, and then we'll hear from after Nicole, we'll go over to maybe Jacqueline and Curtis.
Cool. Yeah. Well, for me, my first models were just statistical models. So, I think data science can be as simple as running an ANOVA, which you can do in Excel. It's kind of an underrated data science tool, I'd say. Yeah, we did like t-tests when I was a consultant. So we were looking at two products out of a manufacturing plant. We were trying to determine, okay, if we change up the processes on one line, is this product ultimately substantially different than the product on the other line? And you can just determine that using a t-test, which has been around since the 1800s. And yeah, so those were my first data science projects. I think that the field originated with statistics.
Oh man, well, if you put it that way, then yeah, back in grad school, I was doing some interesting projects. I did one where grad school for me was like, I probably did this project 10 years ago, and it was using poker data that had scraped or pulled from the World Series of Poker, and
Cool.
using a bunch of the metrics that they had, literally created features and different measures of how volatile a player was to determine their winning percentage at the end of whatever, some period of time. I can't remember. Damn, that was a long time ago. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, excellent point. Yeah, statistics is actually data science, so you could do that and still consider it as data science. Jacqueline, how about you? And we'll go to Curtis after that, and then we'll open it up to Joe and Tom and whoever else.
So it's a similar vein for me as well. I think my first models would be in a statistics class as well. So in my case, I was doing regression in a time series modeling and comparing different modifications of stochastic gradient descent. But yeah, I'm still trying to jump into a model that would be more like in industry. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Curtis?
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So I'll talk about my first NLP project because my actual first project if I talk about it, it's probably one of them forbidden projects you never speak about. Titanic. So my first NLP project was a sentiment analysis task where I'm trying to predict whether a tweet is talking about a disaster or not, but there's different types of like intricacies within the data where there's oh my God, my tongue. Ambiguous, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
Ambiguous, man. You're from England. You're supposed to know your language.
You know what I'm trying to say? But anyways, I worked out, so my shoulders are hurting. I can't get my words out, but yeah. So there's a lot of that big word, words within the data set, which makes it difficult.
Curtis, you went on mute, man.
Have I been on mute?
No, just for the last like 10 seconds or so.
Oh my God. I literally just finished working out, so my shoulders are making my brain not work properly. But yeah, my current task, sentiment analysis, it's the models I built were like logistic regression model, a naive Bayes classifier, a random forest, XGBoost. I've done a bit of deep learning, but in all honesty, the more complex models were really unnecessary for the data set I used. It was just like, let's just do it sort of thing. I recently uploaded the project and I used the LSTM to connect to the web server, but I'll probably change it because there's a bit of latency and I'm just like, it's not even necessary because the accuracy you're getting is literally like fractions more with a deep learning model where I can just use like a simple model and get a response in like seconds. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a fancy one. I like how Eric here in the chat said how doing something in Excel was considered a project. And so back in the day, it's like 2008-ish, I'd say, might have been 2008, 2009. Like I was fucking broke, like could barely pay my rent, broke. So what I would do is this is when Craigslist was a thing. I would offer my services up on Craigslist and do people's entire statistics classes for them for a fee. So I would show up to classes and take exams in community colleges, and I would do all the electronic stuff for the University of Phoenix students. Yeah. So I was doing this for a while, and it just reminded me of that. So I guess those were some of my first projects as well. That was a lot of fun. Anybody else want to talk about their?
I did not just hear Harpreet Sahota say all of that. I did not hear
man,
that.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to get by sometimes, dude. It wasn't like I wasn't the one doing anything academically dishonest. I was just a dude. It was the students that were being academically dishonest.
You were tutoring.
Yeah, pretty much. I was
Very
a consultant.
hands-on tutoring.
Yeah, I was just essentially.
This is sounding like the premise of Suits. Have you guys seen that program?
I was thinking about the same thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, very much similar to that. Yeah.
You know, Harpreet, I do want to give you credit. That was one step above making meth. Good job.
Yes, I was not Breaking Bad at all. I'd love to hear anybody else who wants to talk about their first project. And in the meantime, while people are sharing their first projects, if you have a question, let me know. I'll go ahead and add you to the queue.
I had an idea, Eric. Was the question data science specific, or was it just kind of like the first time you remember you can kind of comprehend using data, like working with data in a sense?
Kind of more oriented to that. Like, because like, for example, like my first project that I can really think of several years ago, I was working I was like a manager in a manufacturing area, and we cast gold and silver rings, and we had a lot of problems with holes in the gold when we would cast. And so we would get together as a team every day and talk about like, okay, well, how are we doing with the temperature, the casting temperature, the flask temperature, all these different like parameters of it. And so I just like literally would hand out a new sheet to every one of my people every day, and they would count when they had problems. And then I would go and hand put it into Excel and make graphs and stuff, and then stick it to the wall every morning so that we could look at them and say, well, this is the thing that we tried yesterday. We changed the flask temperature on our 10 karat white gold. did it help? And that, you know, like there was no prediction, anything. It was just like very rudimentary. I'm just making this stuff in Excel and we're hand counting things, but it was better than nothing. So that's kind of like, to me, it was like, it's data, not, and it's science because it's a scientific method. So we'll call it data science. You would go.
That makes sense. For me, I was just thinking, I was one of those kids in like middle school that sold candy. You know what I mean? So I would tell my parents to like, yo, let's go to Costco or Sam's or something, get them in bulk and undercut the school, you know, during lunches and the vending machines and all that, and sell them for me out of a shoebox. It was all like nicely partitioned. I thought it was super dope. Ended up making a couple $100 in middle school. So until they told me to stop. But yeah, I don't know how legit that is, but in my head, using data, they're selling it at a price. I feel like I could do better, and it worked out. So
some retail arbitrage right there, man. That's awesome.
My first one is kind of like you, Rico. For me, I used to have summer job for my parents. They own store, and I used to run their supply chain, their inventory. So I was using data there and getting a couple bucks there. But the one that stuck with me was during my master's that was focused around supply chain in business. It was this class that was just this big, 3 months, 4 months long simulation. And our role was to run a business and drive the business strategy, including the price and ordering strategy. And you were competing against a machine. That machine had the other business competitors. So it was kind of like Walmart and other retailers. And for us, we're using linear programming to kind of like figure out the optimal price in terms of price strategy, and then the optimal ordering levels for your products that you wanted to purchase. And then you run the simulation. It would tell you, okay, based on your price strategy, you end up making more money than Walmart, which was really the computer simulation versus us as kids, as students who were running that. So it really stuck with me in that case. So that's why supply chain has a special place in my heart, including optimization. So
shout out for supply chain. Like, cut my teeth in that too. I would say the supply chain is still one of the more data interesting areas, just because it has a tangible impact and it has like real consequences if you are right or hopefully not wrong. So yeah, I totally get it. Like I said in the chat, I'm trying to think. I mean, I got into this stuff a long time ago, like late 90s, early 2000s. Like I think the first one that stands out, I think, was I was helping this company. They had a giant call center. They were doing a lot of direct response ads, which at the time, for people who don't remember, there was this thing called a television, and then you would put ads on it, and then you would drive calls to an 800 number, and then they would call a number, and then you would get orders that way. And so my job was to, one of my jobs was to help predict call center volume. So I just finished my math degree. So I think a lot of things that came in handy there was like probabilities. So things like Markov chains, I think, came in handy. And then there was also, what was it called? Erlang C, I think it was. So it's a formula you can use to, predict it's used in call centers a lot. So, and then that same company moved into supply chain. So shout out to Greg for mentioning that, because I think supply chain problems are some of the most fun, and they're some of the most dynamic, because you're not just dealing with like an internal, like an isolated use case, you're dealing with a supply chain. So it's like many players involved in a chain, and you have to figure out a way that it's all going to work. And there's a lot of uncertainty involved. So.
That sounds really, really fascinating. Like, linear programming is something that I haven't come across in years. It's been so long since I've used that stuff. Is that still utilized?
One of my friends, he is a, so if you heard of Extra Space Storage, they're like a very large storage company. So they're based in Salt Lake City. My friend, he's their chief data scientist there, and he gave a talk kind of about how they use linear programming to come up with dynamic pricing models for the storage units. So they take into account things like search traffic and a bunch of other factors. And at the end of the day, they're using methods like simplex and probably more complicated things to develop a dynamic pricing model for storage units. So yeah, I think it's, at least in their case, they're still using it. And I think in supply chain, it's still very used because it's just like, it's simple. Like, why do you want to complicate it? So, but it assumes you have a linear problem to solve, right? So
I sat down through a presentation by Expedia, for example. Companies like Expedia, they are using some sort of solver like optimization constraints to send signals to an ML model for dynamic pricing. So based on, you know, those demands and how to, you know, move the price with regards to this machine learning model would predict what price they should offer to customers based on what they wanted to buy, when they wanted to buy it, where they wanted to buy, and then based on those, you know, linear programming, you know, constraints, that signals that it would receive. So it was super cool that to see, you know, solver being merged with ML to perform these tasks. So companies like Expedia use that all the time.
that's really cool.
So I want to hear Angelo's first project. Angelo, are you still here? Yes, you are. Go for it.
I'm here, yeah. So that goes a while back, probably academic years. So I was working a lot with MATLAB at the time, and I studied engineering, electrical computer engineering. So for my dissertation at the time, I was working with sort of small mobile robots, and I was doing some simulations to kind of try and map out basically obstacle avoidance algorithms. But in order to do that, you need to map the world that they were moving around. So it was kind of predicting whether, based on the sensors around the robot, building a map, a probabilistic map, the probability of having an obstacle or not. And then as you move around and explore the space, kind of build a cumulative kind of view of the world as you build it. Yeah. And that was interesting. So for that, I implemented 2-3 different algorithms, and that was kind of simulations in MATLAB. And then I think Tom mentioned Simulink. That's interesting. Then in my master's, I went to I did that in Reading. There was a cybernetics department. They were doing all about robots and stuff, and they had an industrial robotics manipulator from the ones that you see in kind of production lines. And these are the ones where they have like the 6 degrees of freedom. And that was connected to a computer with a Simulink installation of MATLAB. And then you could write your program. And then I remember they had in the lab, there was the big red industrial button in case something happens. So every time I had to run this experiment to kind of give it a reference signal and see whether they can track it. I was playing the simulation, and the hand was on the red button in case it goes crazy, because the torque until it kind of the algorithm stabilizes the manipulator, it was going really high, the torque initially. So that was a kind of real-time experiment, no simulation. So it was like, okay, I have to stop this.
And everybody's worked on some really, really interesting stuff. Tom's talking about how he did a project with linear models by hand because his teacher apparently was the guy who invented linear models. I'm not sure if I read that right.
Well, Harpreet, it's like this. There was dirt. God created dirt, and then I started my undergrad. It's about like that.
That's awesome. So thanks for having a sense of humor, Tom. So anybody else want to share their first project? If not, then we'll move on to a question that we have here from Anas, which is
got a couple of quick examples.
NLP stuff.
Harpreet?
Yeah, please go for it.
So the first one I can remember, it may be a little tenuous here, but I think it's data related, and it was in my primary school. So I maybe have been 5 or 6 at the time, and it was indexing. And we essentially did it in a physical format. So we got a lot of index cards, we wrote categories on them, and we punched holes in the top of them. And the ones that were positive for the category, we left the top of the hole The one that was negative, we cut out the top, stacked them all together, and we basically pushed the rod through and pulled them up to pull out what was positive for the index. And that's, yeah, I mean, I'm going back a long time here. Maybe not quite as long as Tom, but yeah, I think I might be only single digits behind Tom here. But yeah, that was real early, and yeah, it's only indexing, but I think it qualifies for data. The first proper electronic data thing I did was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. When I was working for a company, we had a lot of field engineers that did a lot of maintenance work. And I was asked to do some analysis on the places they were going to perform the maintenance and the fuel receipts they were booking. So to do some analysis, so it wasn't using any data science, as it were, but it was passing the data to look for trends, to identify any anomalies or outliers that would indicate perhaps, someone was trying to steal fuel, take extra jerry cans there, fill up the fuel, take it home for the car, that kind of stuff. So that was probably the first real world proper data analysis I did, but it wasn't proper data science. I was using Excel 95, I think at the time. I was writing, I was compounding formulas rather than using proper algorithms. But that was my first kind of taster of data analysis.
Man, so many wide and varied problems people have worked on. That's so fascinating to me. Go for it, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
I was about to say one of my, not necessarily my first, because we've all had the science classes and stats classes, but the project that kind of used as my litmus test to see whether or not I want to pursue data science was my master's thesis, where I did a propensity score matching analysis, seeing whether or not SNAP, which is a supplemental nutrition assistance program, improved self-reported well-being or not. So I had this CDC data set that I pulled from the government, and it was my first really large foray into R. So I taught myself R to do this, and this is the first statistical analysis I did that wasn't associated with the class, and a lot of data cleaning for it, and figure out the kind of experimental design. What specifically why this project sticks out to me is I remember the horror of the stats office hours helping group when I showed up my code, and there was 128 variables I was kind of matching for, and I had to create dummy variables for them. I did them all by hand in the code or manually, and I didn't know you can just set them as a category, as a data type. So I spent weeks creating these dummy variables only to learn that about data types, which was that's seared into me pretty heavily. But that project, what I really liked, even though it wasn't predicting anything, I kind of used the foundations from that project, a lot of my current work, for kind of just thinking about statistics and thinking about experimental design, how that informs kind of your questions.
Statistician, I like that one. But I mean, that's the thing, man. You don't know what you don't know unless you come to meetings like this or go to those office hours where people dude, there's an easier way to do that, man. But that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. Next question is going to go up to Anas. I think it is a NLP related question. So if anybody has the answer to this question, feel free to take the floor immediately.
Hey, thank you, Harpreet. So I'm working on this sentiment analysis project, and I collected a bunch of comments from different Facebook posts, and now started with labeling. So when I was labeling, it was very difficult to know what is positive and what is negative. Because at the beginning, I know what the post is, so it was easy. And I was like, oh no, maybe now I'm biased. So I randomized the comments, and I've kind of lost sense of what is positive and what is negative. So to make sure of that, I actually made a small survey on Facebook, and people chose if it's positive, negative, or neutral. And the answers were extremely different. So I want to know what is the approach when you start labeling your sentences? The word, oh my God, if the post is a positive post, it's going to be a positive sentence. And if it's a negative, it's going to be a negative sentence. So I don't know if anybody have information about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. If anybody has an suggestion for that, go for it. But I mean, I would say this: if you have the same sentence and you're going up to the public and asking them to label the sentiment of this of this particular sentence, but you're getting varied responses, I would just take like the mode response, right? If the mode thing, like if people, the overwhelming majority of people say, "Oh my God," in this context is negative, then classify that as negative. Again, I don't know much about NLP or how that would work. Tom, you were talking about NLP at the start of the hour, so I'm going to go to you first.
I was just holding up Dennis's book again. I thought, I think it could even be fun. Go find a existing transformer that does sentiment analysis. It might blow you out of the park without training it any, but you could likely what's called transfer learning. I prefer to call it transfer train the transformer on your specific data set, and it'll get even better at your specific data set. Maybe if you can do it without a transformer first, because transformers are actually easier once you know them, but just kind of getting up to speed with using them and training them or transfer training them can be a bit of a burden, but just that's one option for you.
So Tom, if anybody's interested in learning transformers for context of NLP, is there like certain keywords to search? Because when I type transformers into Google, I just get robots.
Yeah, no, that's if you do machine learning transformers, it's a huge help. Thanks, Harpreet. That's right. And just message me. I'm going to just be honest. If it weren't for Marcin Beards telling me, Tom, the attention mechanism is just a graph neural network. And I was like, thank you, Marcin. Oh, thank you. That helped. And then one night I was frustrated reading papers before I got Dennis's book. And so just so I could keep going and maybe get over some humps, I just started searching YouTube, and I found these really super good explanations of the papers with animated equations, or excuse me, moving of numbers and passing things through the transformers. And I'm happy to send those to anyone here. Just ask me. It was really helpful. And then it was so much easier when I got Dennis's book to understand everything. Yeah, Hugging Face is good. Google Brain is good. In fact, it's a little dizzying how many good resources there are for transformers. By the way, I don't think this would be appropriate for the specific thing you were asking, but you can actually get GPT-2 for free, different versions of it, and then transfer train that thing. It's fascinating age we live in.
My project is, I said that like 2 weeks ago. My project is about the Libyan dialect. So I don't know if the idea of transferring an existing model will work with this one. So I have to go through the labeling.
Which dialect did you say?
Libyan, Arabic, Libyan dialect.
Yeah, you would want a transformer that was already trained in Arabic, and I'm not saying they don't exist, but yeah, for sure. You could use a transformer to translate Arabic to English and then use an English one and then go back, but I don't think you want to do it. It's possible.
Mark, go for it.
Oh, I was actually going to suggest the translation one for our product at my job. We have international customers and a whole team to translate our content for different groups. And so when I did an NLP project, it wasn't fancy. It wasn't doing like sentiment analysis or the pre-built model, but we did translate first and then run the model in English. And I think that's because there's a lot more models trained in English. But I think what I've been seeing is that there's been some interesting, I think Facebook recently came out with a model that can translate. Instead, a lot of translations will go from like, say for instance, you want to go from one language that wasn't English to another language. They'll go from language 1, English, language 2. But now Facebook has a model where you just go straight from language 1 to language 2. So maybe there's a potential where there might be a language that's similar to the initial language you're going for. So like, I know like there might be certain like characters or certain like ways of words that are not common in English. I don't know the language you're using, how it's structured, but maybe something you can look into is like finding similar languages that already have a model and making that transfer over.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
So Anas, we got Ben Taylor in the house. If you want to reiterate your question, maybe Ben might have some insight into it. And also, guys, if you have not yet already, be sure to check out the interview that was released today by Andrew Jones of Data Science Infinity. He's got this talk show podcast called the Hidden Layer, released an episode today with Ben. I was listening to it earlier today. Definitely go check that out. I'll make sure to drop a link right here for that. But Anas, I'll let you restate your question, and then maybe Ben might have some insight for you.
So my question was about labeling sentences. I'm working on this NLP project, and I have to label my own sentences. I collected a bunch of comments from Facebook, and my problem was how to define what is positive, what is neutral, what is negative. Because after I randomized the comments, I took them out of the context. It was very difficult to do that. And I even made a small survey on Facebook, and people had contradicting opinions of what is positive, what is negative. So I don't know, how can I label my sentences?
That's tricky. So are you trying to label them for sentiment or trolling?
Sentiment.
Okay, sentiment. I think this came up a couple times ago. It wasn't related to your specific project, but sentiment is interesting because it's kind of in the eye of the beholder. So are we talking Twitter sentiment, Amazon price action, like Amazon reviews or price action? And so maybe think of it as a vote by committee. So if you go through and personally label it, where you have like negative, neutral, positive, or you assign a numeric scale, there will be some questions that are unknown. You do have the option, you could do a continuous scale. You could also have an other category where maybe think of like Humble AI, or you refuse to give a sentiment score. So if I say like dinner's tonight at 7, what's the sentiment score on that? You could say it's neutral, but you could also come up with an other category where it's more of a binary. You say, here's a sentence that I'm willing to assign sentiment to, and here's a sentence where I have no interest, and I'd actually rather get it flagged and say we will not. So that could be an option. So rather than just running to labeling sentiment, you could start by having sentences where you even decide if they're worthy of sentiment. Yeah, that's tough when you're voting, but it kind of reminds me of attraction. So attraction, if you go through and label it, then it's just going to be your attractiveness model. Same with sentiment. If you just go through and hand label it, then it'll be specific to you. So anytime you can crowdsource that, Mechanical Turk, or bring other people in that you work with and have them do it, it'll help smooth that out.
Thank you.
Just to give you some additional hope, if you do want to check out Transformers, and I'm not really recommending it, I'm just throwing it out there as an option. In chapter 11 of Dennis's book, it's detecting customer emotions to make
Stop
predictions.
it, Tom. Stop it. Stop endorsing that book.
Oh, okay. And so Roberta Distilbert, he's got some pre-built models in there, or he walks you through examples for that. And Ben, I still believe in you. You can beat my commercial. I know you can.
So if you guys haven't seen Tom's endorsement of that book, it's amazing. And I think he crushed it. And the funny thing is I'm on deck to endorse the same book, and I was going to do it the same week. And I saw Tom's, because I'm competitive. So when I saw his video, I'm like, damn it. Because like whatever, it'll be funny if I actually end up doing the endorsement now. I'm going to do it, Tom. I'm not going to let you down.
Ben, what's funny is I'm not competitive. I'm a more together guy. And I'm like, Ben, let me help you make yours better. Let's do it. So let me know.
Yeah, Dennis is a really, really interesting character. I interviewed him a while back. That podcast, that episode is not going to be released for another month or so, but I was editing it the other day, and man, we were like all over the place talking about all sorts of stuff. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy that one. We got queued up. I've got Greg, then Tor, but before we get to that, it's interesting comment here by Joe that I found it something that we should probably unpack a little bit, because I resonate with this. Joe says that he suspects the title data scientist will start splitting into more specific roles as things consolidate. Something along the lines that Vin was talking about maybe like a month ago or something like that as well. So Joe, like, what would be some roles that would kind of be more defined under this data science umbrella?
Probably some new roles, but I think it's kind of a back to the future moment too, right? So like people who are data scientists in marketing will probably either be like marketing analysts or marketing like engineers, you know, because the only difference between, I think, what in our previous discussion about like our you know, our first projects, or you know, our first jobs back in the 1800s or whatever it was, like the only thing that's really changed is, I think, the amount of data and the engineering requirements have changed. The approach, and maybe some approaches, right? But that also goes hand in hand with the new technologies that are available, right? Like deep learning wouldn't have been possible, you know, without GPUs and massive scale and, you know, and all this other stuff, right? And so, but if you look back at the actual statistical approaches, there's not, especially stuff that's used in industry, I'm not including AI research, but stuff that, you know, is used routinely in industry, there's not, I mean, show me new math that's come out using new techniques that hasn't been around for several decades. There's not. And for the most part, a lot of companies, when you're solving the most common business problems, it's not a big data problem, right? And so, so when I start hearing, you know, what a lot of data scientists are doing, and I step back, and I'm sure, you know, other people in the chat see the same thing. You're like, well, that doesn't seem any different than what was done kind of, you know, pre-data science. And so I was talking to somebody else about this today, and it just seems like the term data science, it meant something when it first came out, I think back in the kind of late 2000s, early 2010s, but it since has grown to encompass, I think, a lot more roles. And so it's really confusing, actually, when you think about like what is a data scientist? I mean, it used to mean like, it used to actually be this like really dumb Venn diagram from Drew Conway, which is like, you know, I got like programming skills and stat skills and domain knowledge and like nunchuck skills and like whatever the fuck. And now it's like, I have no idea what it means. And so my personal take is that the titles are going to become a lot more bifurcated and meaningful because it has to. I mean, like the title dentist doesn't mean you're also a podiatrist, right? Like it's kind of specific to a role. But I see data science kind of going off into incorporating a bunch of stuff. So, but that's my prediction, and who knows, might be wrong, but.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that prediction. Thanks for elaborating on that. Appreciate it. So next up in the queue, we got I got Greg, then Tor, then Mark for questions. If anybody else has a question that they'd like to ask, let me know and I'll add you to the queue. Greg, go for it.
Yeah, so I think it's a cool transition too. My question is for Ben. You did a video the other day that resonated. I like to think of myself as a future thinker, and you painted this 10-year vision of what, you know, the future might be in terms of technology, where you're talking about, you know, having a system where you can hold natural conversation with the system that allows you to focus on your creative thinking or creative processes. Well, the question I have for you is, do you see a world where machine will be able to create algorithms from scratch? And if so, how are researchers now going to be more productive? And what is that picture for the whole data science group? How can they create value in a world where automation is more robust and more natural and more integrated into our lives, where we almost don't even feel it in it? So.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's funny because in data science, you have all these algorithms and we feel like it's a complete understanding. We're like, oh yeah, you got to know all this stuff. But there's these other algorithms that data scientists don't really talk about. And so one of those is genetic programming. And so for people that know genetic programming, there's something called symbolic regression, where it'll actually fit a line, but it'll fit it with symbols, like literally pieces of a function, and all of them are valid. They don't actually, it's not like random function pieces. There's tree structures. And Michael Schmidt, he's actually a data robot. He was acquired Newtonian. He was one of the leading experts on genetic programming. But genetic programming can be much more than symbolic regression. And there's actually applications today. They feel a little bit more academic, but I believe someone can go look this up and correct me. I believe one of the most efficient traveling salesman algorithms. So the traveling salesman problem, the most efficient solver was not written by a human. I believe it was written by genetic programming. I believe that's something I saw. And so we're starting to see hints of that. The dream is I feel like these two worlds are separate. So what I just described, genetic programming, has nothing to do with deep learning at all. It's a completely different thing. But then we see GPT-3 making some coding functions, and I think they're still in the cute category or the curious category. Like we see them, we're like, whoa, this is neat. But I think in the next 5 or 10 years, there's people on this call that are going to not have to write a lot of code because you will actually give requests to the computer like you would to a junior engineer. Maybe not to a senior engineer, but to a junior engineer. Hey, I need this. And the computer can just offer it up. I think that was maybe the first part of your question is I kind of wanted to, I have just kind of this childlike love for genetic programming. It's been a long time since I've really dove into it. But does anyone else agree with that? That genetic programming is like a forgotten superpower that just never comes up in data science?
Ben, it's super cool. It's one of those things where I think, when am I going to be able to get back to looking at that? Damn, I got to work on this other thing right now.
Well,
and you know, you're right to mention. Oh, go on.
Well, I was just going to bring up a pet peeve. So one of my pet peeves, if you want to like see my eye twitch a little bit, people interchange genetic algorithms and genetic programming incorrectly. And I noticed for me, I don't know why that bugs me. Anyway, keep going, Tom.
No, I was only going to add, I think GPT-3 is so cool, but we've got to remember, if you take a transformer with 1/100th of the number of parameters and you specialize train it, it can beat GPT-3 at that specialized task. But at the same time, when we look at what is super cool about GPT-3, we've got to remember it's interpolating existing knowledge. It can't extrapolate outside existing knowledge. And so an AI would have to be able to interpret need and fulfill it, or at least make a valid attempt that a human could take it from there. And that means that AI has to ponder. It has to conceptualize beyond what's available to its memories or what it's learned. And I don't think we even know the right kind of questions to ask ourselves on how to get there yet. And once we can even entertain the questions of how do we turn those kind of processes into math, we might get there. The closest thing I see to it is reinforced learning, but getting some kind of reinforced learning system wrapped around some transformer type things and other great methods, getting that to train even on the gargantuan supercomputer the OpenAI group did. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe once quantum arrives and we've learned to ask the right questions, we might have a hope, but that's my philosophical rambling and it just wore me out. Sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting. I posted a link here for anybody that's interested. I'll also put on the show notes from a data robot post about symbolic regression from scratch with Python.
Was it written by Michael Schmidt? I'm curious. He's our chief scientist. I'm curious.
Doesn't have an author on it, but it was written at the end of last year.
Okay.
December 21st.
Okay. A quick factoid to throw out to the group. Genetic programming, it's actually impossible for it to generate code that isn't valid, code that will execute. Where I believe with GPT-3, I haven't played with it, I think it could actually write code that bonks. It's not valid code. And so that's kind of an interesting distinction. I don't want to take too long, but there was a point in my life, I think it was in 2009, that I was obsessed with using genetic programming to write meta-heuristics, which I think at the time some people called them hyperheuristics. So if you take a genetic algorithm, particle swarm, BAT algorithm, Kuko algorithm, like there's hundreds of these. And if you look at them, they all have a intensification, diversification component. They all have the stochastic initialization. If you stare at all these algorithms, you see similarities. And so I was playing with genetic programming. Can I actually have it build the next version of a more robust, and there's a basket of problems you can test these on. But even what I'm describing, people would call foul and say, no free lunch theorem. Like they kind of bring these things up and say, you're wasting your time. Anyway, that for a while, that was a year-long obsession of mine.
Real quick, Ben. The way I see GPT-3, it's kind of like a boilerplate on steroids. It can throw out some great starter code, but you probably would still have to debug it and refactor it a little or add to it. Is that your take from what you've seen?
I haven't had a chance to play with it, but I think it's on the roadmap this year because I work for the marketing group, so we have the flexibility to actually do some of the more creative projects, and so I'm hoping to kind of get my hands dirty this year and play with it, really to cross that uncanny valley and do something that feels a little creepy or funny.
I checked out some of the source code for, because you can tell it to like make a red button and put it here, kind of like you would with a web page and that kind of stuff. And the code looked pretty legit. But you know, if you had to make an API, can you imagine code reviewing that goddamn thing? Like,
you know, the like, simple
stuff.
I
need to fix these. You need to fix this over here. Like that would be pretty funny if you had to do a code review of GPT-3.
You kind of have to silo off parts of it and be like, this runs and it passes the test. Never look inside.
Yeah, and you gotta leave code comments in GitHub for it that it has to interpret and then fix. So that'd be pretty cool. But I guess it depends how brave you are in putting that in production on a first go.
Yeah, if you could segment requests to GPT-3 for code and do it in small enough bites, it probably would save you a ton of time.
This company called Ideas AI is using GPT-3 to every week they run like a list of business ideas generated by GPT-3 and it sends it to your email. So I read that from time to time and I read the ideas and I'm like, come on, that doesn't make any sense sometimes. And then sometimes I go, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool. And people who consume that information kind of upvote the best ideas. So what happens to these ideas, I'm not too sure, but I receive those emails just about every week to go through them, but it's generated by GPT. So I thought that was quite cool.
Right on. Well, some good discussion. Let's go ahead and move on to Tor's question. And then after Tor, we'll go to Mark.
Hi, everyone. Hope you all had a good week. The question I have, it's related to a process that I'm in right now. As you all probably aware, I'm working on this SaaS project and website solution for my industry. And as part of that, right now, I'm in the process of designing and conceptualizing a financial analysis tool with 3 sources of data that's coming in. One is the transactional data, which technically is just each transaction that's been made. Then you have the supporting documentation, which is like in PDF format, Word formats, Excels, etc., which is basically the supporting vouchers or invoices. And then you have the third item, which it's linked to, which is the contracts from the suppliers, also linked back to the financial transaction data. Now, the question I have is A, is it possible for today's technology or analysis, etc., to be able to go into transactional data, match it up with keywords or look for the details in the vouchers and the contracts and generate basically a list of references or page numbers, etc. That's step one. The second part of it is once that list has been created, the user will then actually go in and do their own keyword searches or analysis and match and link and mark, etc. And then that is to be used to support the list. Now, the final step is ML. This is the question where how can ML learn from these 3 steps of matching, etc., so that for future, it will then be able to generate suggested keywords or the matching in the various contracts, the vouchers, and the transaction list. So that's the part one. The next question is, like, as I said, like, is it possible? The next question is the complexity of this, the cost of doing such a project. What would I have to expect from a budget point of view? Sorry.
And it's mind bender, but it sounds kind of similar to what you're describing earlier, Tom. Like the flavor of that question feels like what you're talking about at the top of that hour.
Tor, I apologize. I was trying to track you, but my brain started doing this while I was listening to you. If you could summarize, I'll try my best.
Technically, that's why I'm asking the question, trying to formalize it now, because in my head as well, it becomes quite complex. So the first step is, in simple terms, I think, is that you have 3 sets of data sources. There's going to be some sort of matching between those 3. In step 2, you will have a user interaction where they will then analyze the linkage that's been found by the system of matching and evaluate, and then of course some keywords or whatever else they want to look for. The next step is technically for the system to actually use machine learning based on those 2 steps, so that for future reference, when you're looking at the same supplier or contract or a voucher or a transaction, is then going to start to learn and improve the results from reading the contracts, from reading the vouchers, and to give predictions on where you will find mistakes, quote unquote.
So one thing that's helped me, Tor, when dealing with a gargantuan project like this is just get your favorite drawing method, and it can be by hand or computer, and start not a flow chart so much, but kind of an architecture, you know, a flow of the process. It can be a flow chart, but to me, flow charts feel a little too detailed and constrained for the kind of thing I'm talking about. But this has saved my bacon so many times, just trying to take the time to pretend like I want to present it to all of you, what I'm doing, and really getting to that level of clarity. And this is reminiscent of something I discovered in grad school, because that was the first time I felt like I was really pushing the edge on my own. And I was sharing an office with other guys doing the same. And we'd say to each other, can we have a rollover? And we'd roll over, we'd start explaining our problem to someone else. And before we were a little past halfway through explaining what we were dealing with, we'd get an idea because we were forced to explain it so clearly. And we said, hey, thanks for listening. We'd roll back over to our desk. But I found that I could get almost the same value by forcing myself to draw it up like I had to present it to someone. And it started giving ideas. But once you're at that level, then you can lay it out a little more detailed. And I'd be glad to get on a private call with you, and then we could show up later and share if we.
That'd be cool.
Miserably, yeah.
Because the thing is that I flowcharted basically the stages, the financial analysis, everything I can do in Excel, and where I can kind of develop my own algorithms and all these things. All of that I pretty much have under control, in the sense that I know what I want, I know it can be done because similar things have been achieved. It's going from there to the analysis part and the keywords and the matching and starting to involve different source documentation, etc. That's where the challenge comes. So I would love to be able to have, I'd like to say 15 minutes, but I am sure it's going to take longer. But I think if that could be a good start, I would love to do that. And yeah, I would love to share it on here later on some sort of an overview of what I'm trying to achieve, and with your input, and then we can do a joint, or I can present it later on. I would love to.
And I'd actually, when you and I get together, Tor, once you've drawn it out, I'd love to have more than just me there. I think that would be good. But also, I'll just put a plug for my favorite drawing tool out here. It's a little heavier to use than something like Microsoft Paint or one of those, but it's called Inkscape. It's a free scaled vector graphics program. And it's because it's scaled vector graphics that I love it, because you can scale things and it looks awesome no matter what size you put it at. So I always set the page to the biggest size, and I use it like my own free flow version of Prezi. It helps a ton.
Cool. I just use what is it called, the Open Office Draw. That's what I'm using. I find that very flexible to just make the flow charts top level and to build, and then from there I just basically go into my Excel and build all my modeling and etc. So I've started looking at R and a few other things, but I've just come to the conclusion that to get to that level for me, I don't have the time I just don't have the time to get there to use those kind of tools. So, and learn all over. So I'm going to have to rely on you guys. But the other thing I'm looking at, the conceptually, the project, is it achievable? Can it be done without thinking about the cost? I mean, everything can be done in this world, but can this be performed by the existing tools that we have today?
Yeah, that's the real question. And what I've found is if you've focused on concepts for a long time, it's easier to find those little breakthroughs, those innovations, not at a world level, but just sometimes just understanding the concepts better. I'm like, oh, I think this will work. And I go try it. And it was very non-sexy, but it worked so good because it was based on, just solid concepts. I'm not saying I always have those wins, but sometimes I do.
Eureka. Okay, thanks. I'm not gonna, we'll stop it there. So I'll get in touch with you after now, and we'll see if we can schedule some time if you have some free time, and then we'll talk later on. Thanks.
Right on, guys. Looking forward to seeing what comes of this. Next question is up to Mark, and I think the brain power for that question might have just dropped off the last couple of people, but you had a question regarding build versus buy. Go for it.
Yeah. Also, real quick, towards something you might want to look up is Elasticsearch for keywords. I don't know that for your use case well, but we've been using it at my company, and it's been pretty cool seeing how it works for that. It may not be the full thing, but it can solve maybe part of it. So someone just a keyword to look up for my question about build versus buy. So for context, current project I'm working on is just exploring what would building an ELT pipeline at my company look like, and really upgrading our data warehouse. And so one of the books I read that gave a high level overview of this, they gave the kind of the trade-offs of build versus buying solutions. And so I'm very curious, people's thoughts. And for further context, I'm gonna have to come up with a solution for our current pain points. And I'm to present that to leadership saying like, I think we should invest our resources doing X, Y, Z, or we should invest our money into X, Y, Z, right? So I'm just really curious people's thought process for data solutions, what questions they ask themselves on like, is it worthwhile to spend the time to build something versus buying a solution? So a great example would be like Fivetran for like data ingestion versus building out the pipelines myself. That one's probably a better buy, but but I'm just curious people's thoughts on that process, and then going to leadership to make those cases.
Something about this question reminds me of like this concept of the trying to determine the optimal size of a firm, and it's pretty much all comes down to transaction cost, right? So if there's a particular function that a firm is trying to do, right, if that thing is so complex, so hard to do, that it costs more to outsource it out than just bring it in-house, the transaction cost for that, then just do it in-house. But if it's cheaper to outsource, then just outsource it. I know that's kind of like a not a clear answer, but that's kind of the line of thinking I would take, because, you know, as my company, like I'm the first data scientist there, we got a very small data science team, and we do end up having to buy some tech or some managed solutions, but that's after we do an estimate of how much of my effort it would take, how much of effort it would take for, you know, a solutions architect inside, and, you know, maybe another engineer to help me out. And because it's only a few of us working on it, how long would that take and that cost amount? And usually it makes more sense just to pay somebody else to do it, because it frees us up to worry about other problems, right? So that's kind of the way I would think about it. It's if the time, energy, resources dedicated to doing this solution stop you from doing more impactful work for the business, right, and prevents you from doing activities that bring in more money, then just outsource it, pay the cost, and then focus your energies and efforts on doing those things that are going to be maximum ROI for the amount of time you put in. But I'd love to hear what anybody else says. Greg?
I agree with Harpreet, and to me, it's kind of like a more of a cost benefit analysis type thing. So I'm going to keep it kind of like business-ish. So the way I'd like to think about it is to really analyze the future cost of ownership of your strategy. So if you're, you know, purchasing the service of somebody, a third-party service, and then you're using that, analyzing what the benefit will be. And if that benefit is scaling, then what will be your future cost of, you know, using that service in the long term? But if you build it from scratch, think about if you build it from scratch, now you become the owner of that total supply chain of that technology. And by scaling, how much does it cost you to scale, right? By you being the owner. So think about that future cost of ownership to make that decision. So what the two strategies, what do they give you? How do they help your business grow? And as you grow, your cost also is impacted, and which will get higher faster than the other. You controlling that supply chain versus you outsourcing it or licensing it, and make that decision based on that.
Russell, you've got some good insights here in the chat as well.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think whilst this is strictly in the tech space, I think it translates well to a lot of things. So I use an example. My back garden at the moment, our fences need to be repaired. There's been some bad weather, some high winds recently, and they're not doing too well. I'm capable of doing this myself. I'd like to do it myself. I'm quite a crafty person, but I haven't the time to do it. So I can get someone else in to do it. It's going to cost a lot of money. Therefore, I'd rather not pay that money. I'd rather, you know, find the value by saving that money by doing it myself. However, the time that I would lose, either from taking time off work or social time to do it when I'm wanting to chill after such long workouts, if that equates to, you know, a value that's actually greater than the cost of bringing someone in to do it, it's actually better to just bite the bullet and spend that money. The only wild card that I put in there is that, you know, if you can't find someone to do the job that you would want to, so you get someone to come in, you're going to be disappointed with it and end up redoing it again, then it's not worth it. But, you know, if you've got confidence that they can do it to a good enough level, then yeah, go do it that way.
Yeah, some excellent advice. I think we're all, to a certain extent, talking about the same concept, which is good to hear. Does that clarify anything for you, Mark?
It does definitely give you some key terms to kind of look at for like best practices. I also really like Greg's point, because I couldn't put it into words, but like if I build it, then I'm going to be the owner, and then that might take away time in the future for me from doing things, and data pipelines are eventually going to break. So like, do I want to be in that role?
Yeah, it's transaction costs, right? That's what it comes down to.
especially if blockchain
Russell?
is in development, because your name's going to be stuck to that forevermore.
Right on, man. Well, guys, we'll go ahead and call it a wrap. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and chilling with us this Friday afternoon. So good to see all of you guys. Remember to vote for your favorite data community content creator. We've got a bit.ly short link. The back half of that is data-creators-awards. So I'll go ahead and I'll put that link right here into the chat for all of you guys. Please do help us spread the word and share this with everyone that you know who is a data lover, because we can't make this thing happen without you guys. So please go ahead and share that link. Be sure to check out the episode that released just today with Dave Kelly. That'll be a awesome.
It says it's broken.
Awesome.
Heartbeat.
Oh, is it? Hold on. It might be bit.ly. Hold up. bit.ly-creators-award. AWARD. Oh my God. bit.ly-data.creators.award. So I spelled it wrong, I think. It's supposed to be, there's supposed to be a bit.ly there.
Okay.
So that's what happens.
Okay.
So http://bit.ly, then the back half is data-creators-awards. So yeah, go vote for that. There'll be a great time. Yeah, go check out the episode I did with Dave Kelly. I think you guys will really enjoy that. Keep an eye out for essentially the interview I did with John Crone, Super Data Science. That'll be released on April 1st. Take care, guys. Have a good rest of the evening. Don't forget, we got this going on Sunday morning as well. Comet ML office hours. Come and check that out. And remember, guys, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everybody.